Every generation believes that they're living through extraordinary times, and maybe now maybe now it's true. When you think of all the technology changes, in particular AI, how things are changing so rapidly in the workplace, at home, in science and medicine, it is indeed, it certainly feels to me like an extraordinary time with a lot of change, and it seems like the pace is actually quickening. Over the past year, I've had the opportunity to speak with some amazing leaders, people who actually know what they're talking about when it comes to AI and the evolving technologies. And I've learned lots from those conversations. I've learned certainly that leadership requires different skill sets in fast changing times. And what we've seen from them is that a couple of characteristics seem to jump off the page in those discussions about what characteristics lead you to good leadership. Those characteristics seem to be curiosity. It isn't true that the great leaders have all the answers. They know where everything's going. They know they don't, but they have the ability to adjust, to adapt, to learn, and to modify their approach as they get further and further into the details. I'm so thrilled that we'll be able to talk this month about those leaders, the lessons I've learned from them, that we've learned from them. And I'm going to start today with a fellow who I spoke to earlier this year. His name is Reid Blackman, and he has a really interesting point of view. And I think he dives particularly down into the subject of leading in difficult and fast-changing times. I think you'll enjoy it.
How is that going to affect the socioeconomic situation that America is in? In 5-10 years? No, but nobody knows. There's so many variables. So let's not pretend that we have an idea. That's one thing to say. The second thing to say is there's certain things that in order for us, if you like, to sharpen the human mind, it still has to be old school. It's not to say that you can't incorporate in some way AI, but if you want to get people who can say, zoom out from the trees to see the forest, if you want people who are capable of thinking systematically, if you want people to be able to break down complicated concepts or break down complicated ideas or break down complicated systems to understand all the moving parts and how those parts interrelate, if you want people to be careful thinkers and analyzers, the only way you get the human mind to be able to do that sort of thing is practice, 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 right? The same kind of education that we've been doing for literally over 2 millennia. So I don't think that goes away. And I also, frankly, even with this sort of talk of artificial superintelligence, I don't think that we are anywhere near a place where expertise doesn't matter. In fact, I think that the people who stand to benefit the most from AI, at least as I've seen it so far, are the actual experts, precisely because those experts are capable of vetting the outputs of the AI. Right? So when I'm talking to my favorite AI model about AI or ethics or AI ethics or corporate or organizational change or theories of psychological change or whatever it is, I'm in my sweet spot of expertise, or I can read the thing and be like, no, that's BS. I don't buy. That's not. There's something that's not right there. That smells off. If I'm talking to it about theoretical physics or art history or I don't know, lots of stuff that are outside my expertise, I just look at it and I think, this sounds plausible, but I actually don't know. I don't have the expertise to sniff out BS in this context. And so it's the experts who are better at crafting and responding and benefiting from it. The novices don't have the wherewithal to actually vet it. So one thing to say then is we should still be training for expertise. I think expertise in whatever field is still relevant. Can you find some fields that might go by the wayside? Sure, but I don't think most are going to. The other thing to say, though, is that we actually do face, I think, an expertise pipeline problem. Because the junior people are more easily replaced because you don't hire the junior lawyers, you don't hire the junior research assistants. And then 10, 15 years later, when those people are supposed to ascend to expertise, well, they were never hired in the first place, so they don't exist. That looks to me to be a problem. And if it is a problem, I don't know the answer. I'm actually really excited about the Ethical Nightmare Challenge, this sort of new framing. And the reason is that I've been doing this for, 8 years, 5 years, really intensely focused on AI more than anything else. And I think that the way that large companies go about solving the problem doesn't work very well. Sometimes it does, but implementation is really hard because they're such large organizations. I know it's not just me because I speak to, first of all, I've been hired by, as an external advisor, 3 of the 4 big 4. I know what they're doing. I know how they operate. I know other people in the space. I talk to them. And implementation of these AI ethics programs, or responsible AI programs, as they like to call them, is very difficult and it's very slow. And one of the big things is that the C-suite is a bottleneck. And it's a bottleneck because everyone is taking this kind of policy-centric approach. Let's have our enterprise-wide policy. It's going to take, there's so many cooks in the kitchen, and we're looking at easy 9 to 12 months before it gets board approval. And then you've got to roll it out. You got to roll it out in bits and pieces because you're a company that spans, dozens of markets or hundreds of markets, dozens of countries, several continents. And now you got to translate this policy into particular departments, to particular workflows. Meanwhile, it's been like a year and a half and the technology has changed again. And oh my God, we're implementing this policy that doesn't really work anymore because it doesn't speak to generative AI or agentic AI. Now we got to get the cooks back. So it's kind of turned out to be a bit of a mess, frankly. And what I'm excited about now is what we've started, the Ethical Nightmare Challenge, which doesn't require that we start with the C-suite and a policy. And it doesn't, the other thing is that they start with process and we start with outcome, the nightmare. Let's talk about what the nightmares are. And that can be done at the project level. It can be done at the department level. It could be done at the enterprise level if you want. But that framing of what are the ethical nightmares of your project for this particular project or solution, or for your department? What resources do you have to avoid them? What kind of training do people need? That framing works everywhere. So we can take this risk-based approach. We don't have to start at the top. The C-suite doesn't have to be a bottleneck. And there's certain kinds of training that we can do that's sensitive to that framework that we can implement pretty immediately, without having to wait for the board to approve a policy, which is going to take a year. So that's the engagements that are exciting me now, because we're actually starting to implement this new design and implement using this new framework, and it's looking good.
Makes all the sense in the world. I assume, am I correct in assuming that there's going to be lots of disruption, and the disruption is going to increase in pace in the months and a few years ahead?
Sure looks it. So let me give you a sense of what's happening right now that I think is kind of bananas. It's kind of crazy. The change is not just the result of a new kind of AI, right? We had narrow AI. That's like recognize my dog in photos, spot the broken bone in the X-ray, read these resumes or the mortgage applications and green light the good ones and red light the bad ones. That's narrow. Then we have generative AI, like a ChatGPT. The thing is that that narrow AI and generative AI, those are building blocks. They're not just different kinds of AI. They're building blocks for building really complex AI ecosystems. So now you can talk to your LLM, ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or whatever it is. And now it's connected to the internet, right? You could connect it to your Google Drive. You can say, I want you to go find me such and such. And then it goes off to the internet, finds the thing and whatever. What technologists are working on doing is you could take your large language model, which is going to act as your agent now. You connect it to 30 databases, 20 narrow AIs, 5 other generative AIs, the internet, 20 other software tools. Maybe it's your CRM and blah, 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 all the other tools that you've got lying around in your organization. And now your LLM has access to all those things. And it's now not just the AI that you're interacting with. You're now interacting with an AI ecosystem. There's an ecosystem of software that your AI is acting on and with on your behalf at your request. That's a really complicated system. And that's your agent. And that's just one agent, right? You have a bunch of internal agents, right? Let's say to 1-800-Flowers. You've got a bunch of internal agents. Let's say there's a marketing agent, there's a finance agent, whatever. And then they have to work together. So then you're going to have an orchestrating agent. So an agent who, if you like, oversees and manages all those other agents. And then, see, from a risk perspective, at least you, in principle, have insight into how all those agents were made. And you can spot where the risks might be, where things can break down and falter, et cetera, et cetera. And you've got this agent overseeing it. It's already phenomenally complicated, right? Now have your agent talk to an agent of a third party, or rather an orchestrating agent of a third party who's managing all these other agents, and you have no insight into how they built and tested their agents. So how do you identify all the risks there and manage all the risks there? That's a huge problem.
I would suspect that the best thing to do in that circumstance is to call this outfit Virtue.
That would be helpful. Yes, please do. Yeah, but it's a hard problem. I mean, yes, we can do something to solve it. At the same time, I'll tell any company, look, there's a complexity curve here of AI, and you need to plot where you are on that complexity curve and build the nightmare avoidance infrastructure and training that you need, given where you are in that complexity curve right now and where you plan to be in the next, say, 6 to 12 months or whatever it is. I don't think anyone is ready for multi-agentic AI where agents are talking to agents of other companies. We don't have the technology will tell you they don't really have the tech infrastructure to oversee those kinds of interactions.
Well, if Reid teaches us to embrace uncertainty, our next guest, Dr. Gary King, teaches us the importance of curiosity. It was wonderful to get to know Dr. King. He's up at Harvard, originally from Long Island, but we won't hold that against him. Wonderful guy, just a thoughtful guy, and some of the lessons he's learned by bringing the technologies and the learnings that evolve on the campus at Harvard and bringing them to private industry and bringing them to life in different forms. Amazing set of experiences. He tells a particular story about two of his postdoc students who learned an interesting lesson. They thought they were on their way to learn one thing in social media and then learn something quite different. It's a great story, and Dr. Gary King is an inspirational leader, teacher, and entrepreneur.
Science is, think about, actually, let me contextualize this. So if you look at GDP per capita, or how much humanity has learned, it's basically the same over long periods of time. Over the last 2 million years, I can't do this right now because if I spread my arms, you can't see what I'm doing. So I'll draw you a graph. From 2 million years ago to now, where up is more knowledge learned and down is less. Over 2 million years, it was basically flat. And in the last 400, it's gone like this. And the coolest thing is we get to live on that slope. If we were around 1,000 years, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, very little new would happen. But now, actually, a massive number of new things happens during our lifetime that we get to see.
And aren't we on the precipice of a real acceleration?
We are on the acceleration. That's right. We all see the new things. Maybe you're thinking of AI and things like that. Those are just the latest. That's all. We don't actually see a discontinuity or anything like that. We've been working on those exact things for many, many years. It's the exponential slope, and we get to see different things. When the three of us were born, guessing at our ages, there was no knowledge at all about whether there were planets circling other stars. None at all. We now know of 5,000 of them. I mean, I could go, of course, in area by area by area. There's so much knowledge that we've learned. And the cool thing is when we actually learn it. So how do you learn it? You learn it with science. So what's science? Science is not being scientific. It is not following the methods that I teach in my classes. It's a community of people acting in a special kind of cooperation and competition at the same time in pursuit of the same goals. The particular rules of science is what made that change from flat, no increase in knowledge to exponential growth. In most of the world, there's no vital registration or anything like that. People just go off to the bush and die. And they said to me, is there something you can do about this? Right. And so we came up with a methodology to solve that problem. And that methodology is now used by WHO and lots of others around the world. At the same time, this is the cool thing about being in an environment like at IQSS. At the same time as I was working on figuring out the cause of death in developing countries, I was trying to figure out what was known at the time as the blogosphere. Now it's social media, right? And the promise at the time was somebody could write something, and the first time in the history of the world, millions of other people could read it. It was supposed to be a big democratizing force. Not so sure it worked out that way, but that was important. What we realized was the reverse was not true. That is, there was no technology that enabled any one person to understand what millions of other people were saying. Right? How are you supposed to understand that? Right? And so I thought right at the beginning of social media, it wasn't even called social media yet, it was called the blogosphere. I said, we better develop that technology. And we tried all the existing automated text technologies that existed, and every one of them failed. It was just terrible. But because I was working on this completely unrelated problem, it turned out mathematically, after a year of trying to solve the automated text problem and failing, one day I realized that the solution to the WHO problem, figuring out the cause of death in developing countries, mathematically was exactly the same as figuring out what people are saying on social media. And it solved both problems at the same time. And that second one, I think it's our job to make sure that this new technology can be used for advantage. Whenever there's a change in technology, it horrifies everybody. It scares them because at minimum, it's going to cause people more work before it causes them less work. Teachers in particular are horrified because they've fine-tuned a set of assignments over 20 years, and all of a sudden you could drop them into ChatGPT and can answer them. Well, but the first reaction is tell students they can't use it. No, that's a mistake, right? That's a mistake. So
I think we got past that.
Yeah, so it's really on the instructors to figure that out. Okay, so the question then is, how do you use this technology to take them up to the next level? At the end of the day, if we're talking about education, if you read the entire education literature, which I tried to do at one point, there's a summary of the whole thing is, for students, it's not about the instructor, it's about the student. The more you put in, the more you get out. That's pretty much the whole thing. So if you use a large learning model to put less in, you're going to get less out, period. But if you use it to start at a higher level and get to an even higher level and to put more in, and it motivates you, that's way better.
Understanding the world we live in today is one thing, but preparing yourself for the world that's coming, the changes that are coming, it's a whole different subject. And Azeem Azhar gave us some great lessons in the conversation we had earlier, and I think you'll learn a lot from it. In particular, he gives a great piece of advice to young people. That is, if you're having a difficult time getting a job, you know AI has changed things, you're a recent graduate, go find a not-for-profit in your community that you can do a project for, an AI project, and do it from beginning to end. Yes, you'll stumble along. You'll have to ask Claude or ChatGPT, how do I best do this? But if you just show the initiative to help somebody else while you're learning the tools yourself, you'll make yourself a lot more employable, and you'll develop your own confidence that, yes, you can. You can plod through, but learn and deliver something of value to someone in your community who could really benefit from it.
I mean, I think there's a lot we don't know. So we don't know how sustainable the one-person legal shop will be over time, or the one-person staffing shop. And so what do you do if you're going to go into an environment that is uncertain and unstable, and it's not going to be clear which direction things are going to go? You have to signal adaptability, and you have to signal resourcefulness, as well as some skill to potential employers. And how do you go about doing that? Because I don't think that colleges necessarily have courses can have courses in that. I mean, I think they
don't have the people to teach them.
Well, they may not have the people to teach them either. So one of the big binds is that you can de-risk yourself as a candidate if you have work experience. But of course, you can't get the work experience until you've had the work experience. So things that I think may start to be good signifiers would be taking on a project of some sort that you can deliver end to end. Because when you do that...
Outside of the school setting, or while you're in the school setting?
While you're in school, or outside the school setting, but something that has...
So it could be a social involvement, it could be a club that you're involved with at school, it could be something you do for a small business in your community that you got to know.
Exactly. I think the kinds of, for example, if you were friends with the local barber, which I am friends with the local barber, and I went and said, okay, I will help you build up your customer relationship system, so you can send text messages and emails, and I will get that running, and I will check that customers like that. And I've never done this before, and I'm going to have to read the manuals, but I will get that project running over 8, 10, 12 weeks. What that does is it gives you that sense of commercial experience. Like, what is What is life like when you're outside of the academy, when you put these skills to the test in the real world? Some kind of end-to-end project is a really good
I
signal.
love that idea. How do you advise leaders to adapt and learn and make sure they're keeping up with the changes in technology, besides contracting with you to help them?
Well, there's not much I can do. I mean, how many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? The light bulb has to want to change. And all I tell them is, if you haven't had your oh shit moment using this technology, you need to get it. And you will only get it by immersing yourself. And that needs to be a minimum of 10 hours. Maybe I'll say 8 hours to some people and 16 hours to others. You need to sit there on your own and take yourself through the journey and experiment for long enough that you get to that moment. And when you get to that moment, my hunch is that you realize what the capability is, and you start to be the Adolfo driving the best practices and the vision, and being willing to learn from the people around you as they develop their own skills. You really have to use the technologies yourself at an increasingly high level. You can't be taught this by McKinsey or by BCG. You can't really be taught it by you can't outsource it to a VP to do it for you. This is not like upgrading the finance software. This is something that is more fundamental to how the organization is going to operate, who's going to be valued, how your strategy will shift, who your customers will be, what you might do to your suppliers. I mean, everything is going to change, and the buck stops and starts with one person, which is the CEO.
Something that you would tell us as business leaders or family leaders, something that we should be prepared for in the next year that we might not have at the center of our radar screens right now?
Wow, that's a really tough question. It's really tough because there is a lot changing and there are a lot of shocks. They're really hard to predict. So let me answer it this way. The way that I prepare for things like that is I look at as a business person, I look at my decision loop. I look at how quickly I can make a decision, execute on the decision, see whether that decision works, and then orient myself and take another decision. And the reason that works in the face of uncertainty, in the face of shocks, is that if you're already always making decisions faster than any change or threat that's outside you, you will always be inside the turning circle of that threat. This is the lesson of the Top Gun Fighter Academy, which is, the OODA loop. Stay inside your enemy's turning circle. And so when I look out over a year or over 5 years, the thing that is in my mind is I've got some decisions that will just take a long time, and they are what they are. But I have to have a series of decisions where I can essentially have a very tight decision loop and act and maybe get out of the way or steer towards if it's an opportunity.
Eric Gertler from U.S. News and World Report has quickly become one of my favorite people. In our conversation, or one of our conversations earlier this year, we learned a valuable lesson. That is, you can be in an industry that's going through a lot of change, and certainly the publishing industry, where Eric comes from, has seen that. He's gone through tremendous change. But he gives us a lesson here that's both timeless and practical, and I think you'll get from this conversation some real value.
U.S. News was a weekly magazine, but it was the third in a group that really should have only had two. And Time and Newsweek had much bigger audiences. U.S. News was smaller. Back in its print platform, U.S. News had an audience of the way it was measured back then of 12 million. Time had a little bit over 40 million. And so
40 million a week. Wow.
40 million a week readers. It includes sort of audience pass along rate, but
a lot of people.
A lot of people. And so
I read this morning that the nightly viewership of CNN in prime time is 400,000.
400,000, yeah. dropping. That's right. But as the third in a dying category, you were really in a precarious situation. But what U.S. News had done differently, and where we've really leveraged over the last 9 years, is how to think about providing consumers with the right context, the right analysis, and empower consumers to make the best decision in their lives. And what turned out to be...
You really were not in the news business. You've migrated to the information business.
We were in the information business, and I would say that we were always in the analysis business, because we provided our audience with an understanding and context to understand the world. It wasn't about who was the hottest entertainer at the time. And so
you weren't out there for clickbait.
We weren't. That's right. And it turned out that when you take all the information we have and you think about the data that we provide and you put it on the internet, it's a much more powerful product. And what we have emphasized over the last...
So when you were there, they had the college survey?
College survey and the health survey in a much reduced form. But on the college rankings, those started 40 years ago. And those started with a simple survey where a survey was sent to all the presidents of schools as a reputation survey. Today, we collect, I think it's 17 different major factors. We're looking at outcome, oriented. We're looking at graduation rates. We're looking at Pell Grants. Very detailed.
And you're looking at people's success in different life stages quite a ways out from their graduation.
Well, we look at outcome from the point of, has college done what it said it would do? Are they graduating the students? Are you, we don't look at, 10 years down the road, are you making a lot of money? Because we don't want to put a value judgment. We don't want to value, for example, is it more important to go to Wall Street or to become a teacher? But we want to make sure that if you're going to college, are you getting what you wanted to? Are you getting that degree? Because, you have, we got 40 million Americans that didn't graduate from college and have debt.
Is that what the number is? Wow.
40%. Make sure, again, it comes down to, to values. We make sure that we focus always on our consumer. We make sure that we work on our journalistic integrity. We make sure our editors work separately from our business people. It's ever more important today. And in terms of our revenue model, we have 9 different revenue streams. Just to give you, one sense is we've developed a pretty robust B2B business over the last, 6-7 years.
What does that mean?
So we now provide products to businesses to help them manage their products better. We certainly do advertising. We do lead generation, but we're able to do that because when consumers are on the web and they're looking for whatever the case may be, the best car for them or the best college, when they see our brand, they trust our brand. If they don't trust us, nothing works at that point. And so, first and foremost, before we think about how we're making money, we make sure that we are leading with integrity. We're running the company with integrity on all levels, and that we have that our our compass is facing north all the time. I think what you need to do as a leader is use all of your experiences when you're in a new situation. And for me, it's always been about listen very carefully, ask a lot of questions, and make sure you have a good sense of who are the people as you put together the plan. One of the things I've loved about my career is I've been able to do different things and hop into different levels of responsibility. I think in part, and as you talked about, I took a sabbatical from U.S. News in 2019, not with no idea that I would end up going into government. Again, I ran.
That's not the reason you took the sabbatical?
I did take the sabbatical, but I wasn't. It's a whole story, but I had not planned to take on the job.
Yeah.
I got offered the job I wasn't expecting. There was not a day that went by that I was not totally privileged to work in the Bloomberg administration, and not a day that didn't go by that I didn't learn something about, how to operate or to manage. But I do remember I had a group of very young recent graduates who worked for me, who worked their tails off and did amazing work. And I think, to your point, these were the best and the brightest who wanted to work in the Bloomberg administration and really make a difference. And they asked me if I'd have breakfast with all of the first and second year, who worked for me, and they wanted sort of advice. And during the course of that breakfast, they said, "What advice do you have for us?" And I said, "You need to work harder." And they were aghast. I said, "I'm not saying that you don't work hard. You all work so hard. And I appreciate everything you're doing. But what you don't understand is you're at a time in your life right now where you have no responsibility. You don't have family obligations. You don't have, a spousal obligation. You have the freedom right now. Use this opportunity and take advantage. Learn. Go to events. Meet people. Learn something else, because you're not going to have that same opportunity in 10 or 15 years. Life changes.
It gets more complicated.
It gets more complicated. And now you can just focus on that. So I'm not saying that you're not working hard. You're working so hard, but take advantage of the situation. And I think, and I worry that not enough young people understand that, certainly in this world where we live, where it's fairly, there's remote work and less people coming.
We're getting softer.
I think to a certain degree, not necessarily less sophisticated, because many of these kids are sophisticated and they understand the technology, but there is something to, it's the interpersonal skills. And you know this from all your successes. You'll have a meeting, and then after the meeting, those 2-minute conversation of what do you think about that? That doesn't happen when the Zoom call ends. So it's all those little things. That's
There's
right.
no walk down the hall after the Zoom meeting.
It's those accidental collisions. It's seeing somebody saying, "What do you think about this? I had this idea." That just happens.